Hey guys, welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 blueprint tutorial. Today we're going to be working on what I've been showing in the last few videos, this game jam game, kind of what me and my roommate has fun on working on, those demonstration videos. And what I'm going to show you is what we're going to work on. It's going to be a couple of videos, but I want to show you the end result. The end result will be not the character as of yet, but this spinning saw that we see right here. The fact that it's moving up and down, it has the UMG HUD on it, and you're able to collide on it and it gets damage done to it. And then eventually it gets destroyed. I'll see if I can get that to show. Where eventually it gets destroyed, and then it turns into a bloody version of it, and then kind of goes opaque. You know, it loses opacity there. So that's going to be the end result. But we're going to do it step by step, obviously. So the first things we're going to work on is just importing our textures, creating our sprites, and making our blueprint base, as well as animating that spinning saw. So let's go ahead and get started. Honestly, this is all done in Paper 2D, so if you haven't already, go ahead and create a project within Paper 2D. All the assets that I have are already created, so use your own assets at that point. I'm just going to show you how to make the sprite, how to get it animating, how to get it to move up and down, things like that. So overall, to start, let's go ahead and go into our content browser. Let's go ahead and click on content, add new folder. I'll call this tutorial series, just to have something. Then within this folder, I'm going to make a textures folder. Now in this texture folder, what we're going to go ahead and do is right-click, import. I'm going to go to my desktop. The game we have, it's called Go Kill Yourself, because you're basically killing yourself in the game, so don't mind the name of it. I have the spinning saw. And make sure you're creating PNGs. Mine has an alpha mask. Of course, it's a power 2. I believe mine is 64 by 64. And I have about 8 textures here, one for each 45 degrees to make a whole 360 for it to be spinning. So I'm going to grab all of them, hit open, and then it's going to import all of them. And for now, I'm not going to import the bloodied version of it. I'm just going to do just the straightforward, clean one. But now that we have the textures imported, what we can now do is first create another folder. We'll call this sprite. Now within the sprite folder, let's go ahead and right-click. I believe it's going to be under miscellaneous. We're going to need to create a sprite. We're going to call this spinning saw underscore 0 degrees. And we're going to need to make a sprite for each kind of animation for our flipbook, which we'll eventually make as well. So let's go ahead and Control W. Hopefully it works. It doesn't really work on the first try for me, for whatever reason. So let's go ahead and either do Control W or right click and select duplicate. And name this next one spinning saw underscore 45 degrees. And again, like I said, I did iterations of 45 degrees. So let's keep going. We'll do all of them. Spinning saw underscore 90 degrees. Then spinning saw, what is it, 135 degrees. Then 180. Wait for that to populate. And then 215. No, we did this wrong. 180, and instead of 215, it's 225. And then this one is 270. And then the last one's 315. So those are all our sprites, and now we need to go into each individual sprite and put in a texture. Okay, so let's start with 0. Let's just open all of these up just to have them there. So in total, there should be 8. So keep that in mind. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Let's go back into our textures now and just plug them in. So right here where it says source texture, just throw them in. And right there it populates. And do this for each one. So now 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135. And make sure your naming convention's on point just to make your life easier. We'll do 180, 225, 270, and then last but not least, 315. And now the last thing we need to do to really get the sprite to come to life, we're going to take these individual sprites and we're going to add them to what's called a flipbook. So let's right click, go to Sprite Flipbook, and we'll call this FB for Flipbook Spinning Saw. Now we'll double click, and obviously there's nothing here. So what we need to go ahead and do is, since our saw, we have 8 sprites, we want to go ahead and create 8 keyframes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now right here for sprite, it has something for us to plug in there. So we're going to do this in order, starting with 0 to 315. And be aware when you put the first sprite in, it's going to look like it's flashing. And that's because all these are empty except for the first one. So it's going to be a little harsh on the eyes for a little bit until all of them are in, but let's just slowly add them. And make sure you keep the order going. Okay. And last but not least, 315, and now it should look smooth. So it looks a little jumpy, but it's nothing we can make a big deal about. But now that's going, it's working. So that's exactly what we want. So the next thing we're going to need to do, because in our original sprite blueprint for the spinning saw, we have a metal pole that's there. So let's work on that. Let's go back into our textures. Let's make a new subfolder in here. We'll call this spinning saw. Make our lives easier, get things organized quickly and at the start. And then let's make one more folder. We'll call this metal pole. Now in the metal pole folder, again, I have my own unique asset, so I'm going to import that now. And for the metal pole, we're not going to make this exact. We can make this a sprite if you want. So what I did is I just made it a static mesh, and so I made a material for it. But for the sake of consistency here, we can also make it a sprite. It's just not going to be animated. So let's right click. Actually, let's do a new folder like we just did. We'll do spinning saw. Throw these guys in there. And another folder, metal pole. Now in the metal pole, like we did earlier, we'll go to miscellaneous and then sprite. And we'll just call this metal pole. Double click that. Go into our source texture and just throw them in. And again, this one has an alpha mask, that's why you're able to just see the pole. So keep that in mind. If you don't know how to do that, just look up some Photoshop tutorials. It's pretty easy to make an alpha mask in Photoshop. But now we got our 2 sprites together. It's perfect. It's exactly what we need. So now, let's go ahead, make a new folder. We'll call it blueprints. Oops, that's not what we want. Add a new folder, blueprints. Now in this blueprint folder, let's make a new blueprint class. It's going to be actor. We'll call this BP spinning saw underscore vertical. Now let's double click that. So we have our empty blueprint class now. So what I usually do, the very first thing I add is a scene actor, and just call it root. And now we can add our 2 sprites. So let's go into our sprite folder. Let's add the spinning saw first. So let's go to paper flipbook FB spinning saw, and we'll just call this spinning saw flipbook. And again, naming convention is pretty clutch if it's something you want to make sure you're doing. And the next is our metal pole. So select that in our content browser, add component. Now paper sprite metal pole. And we'll just call this metal pole sprite. And now we have our two actors together. So honestly, we want to make sure things aren't clipping. We want to make sure scale is on point. So let's go ahead. Make sure your lock is hit. We're going to work with the metal pole first. Make sure your lock screen right here is locked, just so when we change axes, it will affect all three. But in our case, it's 2D, so it'll affect just the X and Z. So let's do 2. And then let's unlock it and then make C like 4. No, that's too big. Let's make it 3. And then let's select our sprite here for the saw. Let's move it up 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter because it's a very small difference. Let's center it as best as we can. Doesn't have to be too perfect. And let's make this size, I don't know, 1.5. Nah, 1.25. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. And what else we want to do for at least this project, we want to take collision off the metal pole. So uncheck generate overlap events, and then collision presets down here. Let's just make it no collision. Let's compile and save that. And then for the spinning saw, just for consistency purposes, let's uncheck generate overlap events and turn off collision. And instead, let's make our own default collision just for future references here. Let's add a component. It's going to be box collision. It's the closest one, easiest one we can do here. And we'll just call it spinning saw collision. And then let's left click drag it under where it says spinning saw flipbook. That way they're attached to one another so that when we animate the spinning saw sprite, the collision is going to move along with it. And last but not least here, let's go ahead and let's set the scale back to 1 on each axis. And now let's try to scale this as best as we can. For Y, it can be as thin as 1 if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. But let's try 64 by 64. Yeah, that's a good size. Just even it out as best as you can. Compile, save that. Now for the collision, everything we have by default is exactly what we want to need. It's generate overlap events and then overlap all dynamic. So we're going to leave that collision alone. And that's basically all we need to do for the blueprint aspect of this. But now what we're going to go ahead and do, we're not going to end this tutorial until we actually get the spinning saw animating. So let's go back into our content browser here. Let's go into our blueprints folder and grab that spinning saw. Let's right click, hit place actor, and the scaling is pretty good. Yeah, that's not too bad. So let's go back into the blueprint. Let's have the spinning saw start at the bottom. And because we have the collision attached to it, it moves along with it. That's just a good way to visually see that. Let's first work in the construction script. Let's grab the spinning saw flipbook. And let's get its world location. I'm going to show you something that's pretty neat that I saw that Epic does for the Paper 2D if you didn't pick it up. And with the world location, let's split its constructions. Its constructs here, just so we get the X, Y, and Z individually. And now pulling from the same spinning saw flipbook, let's set world location. We're also going to do the same thing. We're going to split this struct here, and then connect it to the construction script. We're going to make X and Z plugin, but then we're going to make the Y. Let's make this positive 1. And now let's copy and paste this, connect it up right next to it, and we're going to do the same thing for the metal pole. So let's grab the metal pole sprite and just replace it. And the last thing we're going to do is make its Y location 0. And what it's going to do, so see how we're kind of just moving everything here? Once we hit compile, it's going to snap it to Y equaling 0 or 1. And as you can see, I can't pull it anymore. I can only move it left and right or up and down. I can't move it in and out. Which is convenient for us because it's a 2D game. So that way, no matter what, just for an example, let's just right click anywhere, add it again, and now see, it snaps. It's pretty convenient, it's really nice. So now that we have it in our scene, like I said earlier, we can play, but nothing, nothing awesome's happening. It's just like, hey, look at that, I'm just playing. But what we want to actually go ahead and do is make this go behind the player. We want the player to be forefront. So instead of this being 1, we'll make this 0. And instead of this being 0 for the middle pole, we'll make this -1. Now, it's still not working the way I intended it to. I wonder why. Let's try some bigger numbers, I guess. Let's try -1 and -2. Yeah, player's still not being placed ahead. Very strange. Not too sure why. Should be ahead. But still behind. Let's go to my character blueprint real quick. Does it have anything in the construction script? No. Let's do this. Let's do get actor location, split, and set actor location, split, connect that up. Let's see if that works. If it doesn't, I don't really care too much, but it does. Cool. So what I did to fix it, I go into the character sprite class, so the 2D side-scroller character. In the construction script, I just make sure Y is set to 0 by default. So now we're ahead of it. Now we're moving. So let's go ahead and exit out of the character. Let's focus on the vertical saw again. One thing I want to go ahead and do, let's go ahead and grab our spinning saw collision, and then right-click in the event graph, do a collision add-on begin overlap. Let's just have the stages ready for when we want to go ahead and do damage. Let's do other actor. Let's cast to 2D. So 2D side scroller character. And then we'll print, we'll have it print hit character. That way we just know the collision's working. So test it, hit character shows up, so we know that's working. So now the last thing we're going to go ahead and do before we end this tutorial is animate our spinning saw. So this all takes place with the event begin play node. And the first thing we're going to need to do, how we're animating it, it's going to be moving up and down, which is the Z direction. What we want to go ahead and do first is get the default Z position of the spinning saw as soon as we play the game. So let's go ahead and grab the spinning saw flipbook, left click drag and pull it in, and do get orb location. And of course, we're going to split this, and we only need the Z. Now what we can do here is grab return Z value, promote to variable, and we'll just call this default spinning saw Z position. Kind of a long name, but whatever. And the reason why we're going to do this is because we're going to grab the Z default position and then add or subtract floats from it, so we know where to basically move our actual spinning saw. So without doing that, it's going to be kind of messy, and you can only have it work in one position. But either way, let's go ahead and work on our timeline. Obviously, this can be done through a timeline. So let's go ahead and right-click all the way at the bottom. You'll see Add Timeline. Let's call this Spinning Saw Animation. And let's go ahead and double-click on it, open up the graph. And this is going to be, by default, we'll make it about 1.5 second animation. It's going to be a float, so let's add float track, and we'll just call this Spinning Saw Animation. And we're going to need 3 points. So one at 0.0, one at 0.75, the other one at 1.5. See, I'm just clicking here. So it's 0 out all our points here. So the very first one should be 0, 0. The middle one should be 1.5 and 1. Oh, I'm sorry, 0.75 and 1. And the last one should be 1.5 and 0. Now last but not least, let's control left click all these guys, and once they're all highlighted, let's right click on them and do auto, just so we have a Bezier curve so it's smooth. And then we're going to check loop, because we want this always to be playing. And that's really all our graph is. So with the graph done, let's go back into our event graph. And just for interesting purposes, not interesting, but consecutive, not the consecutive either, that's not the right word, for just thoroughness, let's go ahead and create a new variable. We'll call this animation play rate. It's going to be a float, so let's go ahead and change its type here. Hit compile, default it to 1, and let's hit the I here to make it public. And now, let's grab our spinning saw. Where is it? Under components, spinning saw animation, let's grab that. Let's do set play rate. Connect that up to the set position and then plug that up into play. And now the new rate, that float, we're gonna grab animation play rate and just plug that in. That way, because it's public, what we can do is have each spinning saw have its unique play rate. So in our details panel, right here, animation play rate, you can change it to 0.5, 2 if you want it faster, things like that. And now we're going to need to go into basically the meat and potatoes of this aspect. This is actually where we're going to animate it. So our spinning saw animation, let's drag from it and create a linear interpolation or a lerp for float. The actual spinning saw output here, that's going to be the alpha. Its A position is going to be its default saw position for the z-axis. And then its B is going to be the spinning saw position plus a certain amount. So let's do 400 by default, just for testing purposes, and plug that up into B. And now, let's grab the spinning saw flipbook. Let's do get world location. And like usual, we're going to split this up. And then what else we're going to do is set world location. And we're actually going to plug the set world location up into update. And we're also going to split the new location struct here. And then from the get world location, X and Y are going to go in like normal. But it's the Z from the return value that we're going to connect. So let's see if that works. And it does. It looks like we can adjust some parameters of it. So let's move this down a little bit. And then change 400 to, I don't know, 550. You know, throw some numbers in there, see what works best. And there you go. And the beauty of it is you can just duplicate this, drop it anywhere you really want, change the play rate if you feel like it, and just go back in. And it works the same way. Has the same collision, has the same idea. So that's going to be it. So we're going to continue next. We're going to create the UMG HUD for these objects, just so you can display health, how many times it's been hit, things like that. But for now, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, either click on me or the subscribe button above to subscribe to the Devin Level Design channel. If you want to see more videos, click on the right for more blueprint tutorials and blueprint examples, things like that. As well as going ahead and liking, sharing, commenting on the video. Also, big shout out to Esteban Lopez, who I'm working with on this game, for all the help we're doing together. It's also in the description. Check out some social media content like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Follow me, do all that good stuff. But again, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye!